The dark truth behind Ronnie Bard, a deadly conspiracy unfolds at the Cordains mansion. The quiet elegance of the Cordains mansion has been shattered by a revelation that will send shockwaves through Port Charles for years to come. What began as a touching reunion story, the arrival of Monica Cordains' long-lost sister Veronica Ronnie Bard, is about to transform into one of the most chilling criminal conspiracies in General Hospital history. Behind Ronnie's warm smile and carefully rehearsed family memories lies a truth far more sinister. She is not Monica's sister at all, but a professional con artist, part of an international criminal organization that specializes in inheritance fraud. And her crimes run deeper than anyone could have imagined. Monica's death was not natural, but the result of a slow, calculated poisoning orchestrated by the woman the Cordains have welcomed into their home. As Tracy Cordains' instincts sharpen and her investigation intensifies, she stands on the precipice of uncovering a nightmare that will test the very foundations of her family. The confrontation that awaits in the mansion's basement will reveal not just one murder, but a pattern of killings stretching back years, a trail of victims whose estates were systematically plundered by this deadly impostor and her shadowy employers. The poisoning of Monica Cordains. Monica Cordains passed away peacefully in her sleep, or so everyone believed. The beloved physician, matriarch of one of Port Charles's most prominent families, had lived a full life marked by triumph and tragedy. Her death, while deeply mourned, seemed to be a natural conclusion to nearly 5 decades of storylines that had made her one of the most iconic characters in daytime television history. The family gathered for her memorial service, sharing tearful memories and celebrating a life well lived. Jason Morgan broke down at the church. Ned Cordains reflected on their complicated but loving relationship. Even Tracy, despite their decades of conflict, struggled to hold herself together. But beneath the surface of this seemingly natural passing, a horrific crime was unfolding. In the months leading up to her death, Monica had been systematically poisoned by the woman she believed to be her long-lost sister. Ronnie Bard had arrived in Port Charles with a carefully constructed backstory. She and Monica had been orphaned as children and separated into different foster homes. While Monica had been taken in by Dr. Gail Adamson Baldwin and flourished, Ronnie claimed to have suffered in an abusive foster situation. The story was designed to tug at Monica's heartstrings, and it worked perfectly. Through a series of letters that Monica believed were genuine correspondence from her estranged sister, Ronnie had wormed her way into Monica's emotional life during her final months. These letters spoke of regret, of a desire for reconciliation, of wanting to know her sister before it was too late. Monica, weakened by age and illness, had responded with the compassion that had defined her medical career. She had opened her heart to this woman, never suspecting that each tender exchange was part of an elaborate plan to position Ronnie as the perfect beneficiary. The poison was administered slowly, carefully, small doses that accelerated Monica's natural decline without raising suspicion. To the doctors at General Hospital, it appeared that Monica was simply fading, her body giving out after nearly 8 decades of life. But in reality, each visit from "Dear Sister Ronnie" brought with it another carefully measured dose of toxin. The method was sophisticated, designed to mimic natural organ failure and avoid detection even by Monica's physician colleagues. As Monica's health deteriorated, Ronnie was there, playing the devoted sister, offering comfort and support. She manipulated Monica's emotions expertly, speaking of their shared childhood, of parents neither could fully remember, of the cruel twist of fate that had separated them. And in those final weeks, as Monica's strength ebbed away, Ronnie suggested that perhaps Monica might want to ensure her beloved sister was taken care of. After all, they had missed so much time together. The forged will and the theft of the Cordains fortune. The reading of Monica's will sent shockwaves through the Cordains family that reverberated far beyond what anyone expected. Gathered in the mansion that had been the setting for so many family dramas, the Cordains listened as Alexis Davis, serving as executor, revealed Monica's final wishes. Jason received Alan's treasured watch, a touching tribute to the father-son relationship that had eventually healed. Brooke Lynn was given Monica's pearl necklace, a symbol of the bond between them. Each great-grandchild received a trust fund, ensuring their futures would be secure. But when it came to the most valuable asset, the Cordains mansion itself, worth tens of millions of dollars, Alexis announced that Monica had left it to Veronica Bard, the sister she had only recently reconnected with. The room erupted. Tracy's face went white with shock and then red with fury. This was impossible. Monica would never have done such a thing. The mansion was the heart of the Cordains legacy, the physical embodiment of Edward and Lila's empire. For Monica to leave it to someone outside the immediate family, someone who had only appeared in the final months of her life, was unthinkable. Tracy received only a jar of Lila's famous relish, adding insult to injury in what felt like a deliberate slight. As the family reeled from this revelation, Tracy's formidable mind began working. She had never trusted Ronnie from the moment they met in the Cordains crypt, where Ronnie had appeared to pay her respects to Monica. There had been something off about the woman's demeanor, something calculated behind her sorrowful expressions. And now, with this shocking bequest, Tracy's suspicions crystallized into certainty: this will was a fraud. The will itself was a masterpiece of criminal forgery. Ronnie's organization had not simply created a fake document, they had gained access to Monica's actual legal files, studied her handwriting, her signature patterns, the language her attorney typically used in estate planning documents. Using sophisticated computer software that could mimic handwriting with near-perfect accuracy, they had created what appeared to be a legitimate codicil to Monica's will, dated just weeks before her death and properly witnessed. The forged document contained language that seemed quintessentially Monica, references to wanting to make amends for past regrets, to ensuring her sister would have a home and security after so many years of hardship. It was emotionally compelling, the kind of gesture that fit with Monica's compassionate nature. Alexis, reviewing the documents, had found everything in order. Monica's longtime estate attorney had confirmed that Monica had indeed come in to make changes to her will shortly before her death, or so the records indicated. But Tracy knew better. She had lived with Monica for years, had sparred with her, had ultimately come to respect and even love her sister-in-law. Monica was sentimental, yes, but she was also a Cordains. She understood the importance of preserving family legacy. She would never have disinherited her actual family in favor of someone she had barely reconnected with, no matter how poignant that reconnection might have been. Tracy's investigation, uncovering the deception. Tracy Cordains had not survived decades in a family of sharks by being naive or trusting. Her instincts, honed by years of corporate warfare and family intrigue, told her that something was deeply wrong with Ronnie Bard. While other family members welcomed Ronnie with varying degrees of warmth, Ned being polite, Brooke Lynn curious, Michael initially sympathetic, Tracy watched with narrowed eyes and growing certainty that they were harboring a viper. Her first move was to secure legal counsel. Tracy contacted Martin Gray, despite their complicated history, recognizing that she needed someone with both legal expertise and a willingness to fight dirty. Together, they began dissecting every aspect of Ronnie's story and the suspicious will. Tracy demanded to see the original letters that Ronnie claimed Monica had written, insisting on independent handwriting analysis. She wanted to know exactly when Monica had visited her attorney to change her will, who had witnessed the signing, what Monica's physical and mental state had been. Simultaneously, Tracy launched her own investigation into Ronnie's background. She hired private investigators to dig into Ronnie's past in North Carolina, to verify her claimed employment history as a waitress who had pulled herself up through community college and self-education. What they found, or rather, what they didn't find, was deeply troubling. Ronnie's digital footprint was remarkably thin for a woman of her age. Employment records were sparse and inconsistent. Tax returns existed but seemed almost too perfect, too clean. The handwriting analysis of Monica's supposed letters yielded the first concrete evidence of fraud. While the letters appeared genuine to the untrained eye, forensic document examiners discovered subtle irregularities, pressure variations inconsistent with natural writing, microscopic evidence of digital manipulation, slight variations in Monica's signature that suggested computer-generated forgery rather than authentic handwriting. The letters that had so touched Monica's heart in her final months, that had made her believe she was reconnecting with her lost sister, were elaborate fakes. Tracy's next discovery was even more chilling. Digging into court records and death certificates in Durham, North Carolina, where Ronnie claimed to have lived, Tracy found that a Veronica Bard had indeed existed. But that woman had died in a car accident 3 years earlier. The woman currently living in the Cordains mansion, accepting condolences and claiming her inheritance, was using a dead woman's identity. She was not Monica's sister, she was an impostor, a fraud who had studied the real Veronica Bard's life story and assumed her identity for the purpose of this elaborate con. Armed with this explosive information, Tracy knew she needed more evidence before making her move. An accusation of this magnitude, leveled against someone who had just inherited tens of millions in real estate, would require ironclad proof. She needed to understand not just who Ronnie really was, but who had sent her, who had planned this sophisticated operation, and most importantly, whether Monica's death had been as natural as it appeared. The basement confrontation, a deadly revelation. The confrontation between Tracy and Ronnie begins innocuously enough, with Tracy requesting a private conversation about family matters in one of the mansion's more secluded areas. Ronnie, confident in her carefully constructed identity and legal position as the mansion's new owner, agrees. She has successfully navigated every challenge so far, deflecting Tracy's initial hostility, winning over other family members, even managing to delay a police search warrant by finding a technicality in the address. She believes herself untouchable, protected by forged documents and the goodwill she has cultivated among the Cordains. But Tracy has not requested this meeting for negotiation or reconciliation. She has requested it for justice. As they descend into the mansion's basement, ostensibly to discuss some of Monica's stored possessions that Ronnie now technically owns, Tracy's demeanor shifts. The carefully controlled politeness drops away, replaced by the steel that has made Tracy Cordain one of the most formidable women in Port Charles. The real Veronica Bard died 3 years ago in Durham, North Carolina, Tracy states, her voice cutting through the dusty air of the basement. I have her death certificate. So who are you really? For a moment, Ronnie's mask slips. The carefully crafted persona of the sweet, damaged woman who only wanted to know her sister before it was too late flickers and dies. What replaces it is cold, calculating, and utterly devoid of the warmth that had fooled so many. This is not a woman reuniting with family. This is a professional criminal whose cover has been blown. The conversation that follows reveals the full scope of the horror. Ronnie, or whatever her real name might be, is not a simple con artist. She is part of an international criminal organization that specializes in inheritance fraud on a massive scale. They identify wealthy elderly individuals who have complicated family situations, estranged relatives, or unclear succession plans. They forge identities, create elaborate backstories, and insinuate themselves into these families during vulnerable moments. But the organization's methods go beyond simple fraud. When natural death doesn't come quickly enough, when the timeline needs to be accelerated, they use poison. Slow-acting toxins that mimic natural illness, administered carefully over weeks or months, impossible to detect without knowing exactly what to look for. Monica Cordain was not their first victim, she was one of many. As Tracy presses for more information, demanding to know who sent Ronnie, who planned this operation, Ronnie's demeanor becomes increasingly threatening. She has been backed into a corner, and cornered predators are the most dangerous. The basement, with its thick stone walls and isolated location, suddenly feels less like a room and more like a trap. Tracy realizes with dawning horror that Ronnie has lured her here deliberately, not to discuss possessions, but to eliminate the one person who poses a genuine threat to her scheme. The pattern of murder, Ronnie's previous victims. As the confrontation intensifies, Tracy demands answers about Monica's death, and Ronnie, perhaps believing that Tracy won't leave the basement alive to share this information, begins to reveal the full extent of her crimes. The admission comes with a chilling casualness, as if discussing a career rather than murder. Monica Cordain was not Ronnie's first victim, nor was the Cordain fortune the first estate she had helped her organization plunder. Over the past decade, Ronnie has been involved in at least 6 similar operations across 3 countries. Each followed the same basic pattern: identify a wealthy target with complicated family dynamics, assume the identity of a deceased relative or lost family member, forge emotional connections during the target's vulnerable final years, manipulate wills and estate documents, accelerate death through untraceable poisoning when necessary, and claim the inheritance. The organization she works for operates like a corporation, with researchers who identify potential marks, forgers who create impeccable documentation, and actors like Ronnie who play the roles with Academy Award-worthy conviction. In Boston, she had been Margaret, the long-lost daughter of a shipping magnate, reunited with her father after decades of separation. She had poisoned him over 6 months, slowly enough that his doctors attributed his decline to congestive heart failure. She walked away with $12 million and a valuable art collection. In Vancouver, she had been Patricia, the estranged sister of a tech entrepreneur with no direct heirs. That operation netted $8 million and required only 3 months of poisoning, as the target was already in poor health. The Monaco operation had been her most audacious before Port Charles. She had posed as the secret daughter of a casino owner, armed with forged DNA tests and fabricated letters. That scheme had required eliminating not just the target but also a suspicious nephew who had started asking too many questions. Ronnie speaks of that murder with disturbing matter-of-factness, as if removing obstacles is simply part of the job description. Each operation had been meticulously planned, with the organization providing her with complete backgrounds, forged documents that would withstand legal scrutiny, and support infrastructure to handle any complications. They specialized in identifying targets who were isolated, estranged from their families, or desperate for emotional connection in their final years. Monica Cordain, with her public profile, her wealth tied up in the famous Cordain mansion, and the recent loss of so many family members, had been a perfect mark. What makes Ronnie particularly dangerous is not just her willingness to kill, but her talent for the long game. She doesn't simply forge documents and hope for the best, she studies her targets obsessively, learning their speech patterns, their memories, their emotional vulnerabilities. She had spent months learning everything about Monica's childhood, her foster care experience with Gail Baldwin, her relationships with her family. The letters she had sent had been psychological masterpieces, designed to exploit Monica's sense of guilt about her privileged upbringing compared to her sister's supposed hardship. Life or death in the basement. The basement of the Cordains mansion, with its thick stone walls and soundproofing that had been installed decades earlier by Edward Cordains for his wine cellar, becomes an arena for survival. Tracy Cordains, now in her 70s but far from helpless, realizes that she is facing not just a con artist but a trained killer who has ended multiple lives without apparent remorse. The woman before her has poisoned Monica slowly over months, has murdered suspicious relatives in previous operations, and now clearly intends to add Tracy to her list of victims. Ronnie's approach is calculating rather than impulsive. She explains, almost conversationally, that Tracy's death will be ruled an accident, a tragic fall down the basement stairs, perhaps, or a heart attack brought on by the stress of grief over Monica's loss. The organization has people in place to ensure the medical examiner doesn't look too closely. They have contingency plans for exactly this type of complication. Tracy's body will be found by other family members, and Ronnie will play the devastated witness, further cementing her position as the grieving sister who has now lost another family member. But Ronnie has made a critical miscalculation. She has underestimated Tracy Cordains. Tracy did not survive decades in one of daytime television's most cutthroat families by being weak or unprepared. She has anticipated this possibility. Before coming down to the basement, she had set certain plans in motion: text messages to trusted allies with time-delayed sending, voice-activated recording devices hidden in her clothing, and most importantly, a distress signal to Jason Morgan and Dante Falconeri that will trigger if she doesn't check in within a specified timeframe. The physical confrontation that erupts is brutal and desperate. Ronnie, trained in close-quarters combat by her criminal organization, is younger and initially has the advantage. But Tracy fights with the ferocity of someone protecting not just her own life but the memory of Monica, the legacy of her family, and the safety of everyone Ronnie might target next. The basement becomes a chaotic battlefield, with improvised weapons, wine bottles, storage crates, antique furniture, being deployed by both women. As they struggle, Ronnie reveals more of her organization's operations, perhaps in a psychological attempt to demoralize Tracy by showing how outmatched she is. The group has operatives in law enforcement, in legal offices, in medical institutions. They have successfully executed dozens of these inheritance frauds, and the ones that have been discovered represent only a fraction of their work. They target the elderly wealthy precisely because any sudden death can be attributed to natural causes, and because aging victims often make changes to their wills that seem impulsive or emotion-driven to outside observers. But even as Ronnie boasts of her organization's reach and power, cracks appear in her confidence. Tracy's resistance is fiercer than expected. The delay tactics Tracy has employed, asking questions, demanding details, keeping Ronnie talking, have bought valuable time. And most critically, Ronnie has made her confession in a space where Tracy has deliberately planted recording equipment. Every word of her admission, every detail about Monica's poisoning and the previous murders, is being captured for posterity. The arrival of Jason Morgan and Dante Falconeri, responding to Tracy's distress signal, transforms the confrontation from a potential murder into a rescue and arrest. Bursting into the basement with weapons drawn, they find Tracy bloodied but alive, standing over a cornered Ronnie. The evidence Tracy has gathered, the death certificate of the real Veronica Bard, the forensic analysis of the forged letters, the recordings of Ronnie's confession, will be more than sufficient to ensure that this particular con artist's career ends in prison rather than with another stolen fortune. The international criminal network exposed. Ronnie's arrest in the Cordains basement marks the beginning rather than the end of the investigation into the international criminal organization she serves. As Port Charles police, working in cooperation with federal authorities and Interpol, begin unraveling the network, the scope of the operation becomes staggeringly clear. This is not a small-time fraud ring, it is a sophisticated global enterprise that has been operating for at least 15 years, with operations on 4 continents and estimated total theft exceeding $500 million. The organization's structure mirrors that of a legitimate corporation, complete with specialized divisions and professional management. At the top sits a shadowy figure known only as the benefactor, whose real identity remains unknown but who is believed to be a former estate planning attorney with intimate knowledge of inheritance law in multiple jurisdictions. Below this individual operates a network of cells, each specializing in different aspects of the fraud: research and target identification, document forgery and identity creation, field operations, Ronnie's division, medical support, providing access to untraceable poisons and corrupt medical professionals, legal manipulation, lawyers and paralegals who help forge wills and estate documents, and cleanup, dealing with complications like suspicious relatives or investigators. The research division's methods are particularly chilling. They monitor obituaries and estate settlements, looking for patterns that suggest dysfunction or opportunity. They hack into law firms' computer systems to access confidential estate planning documents. They cultivate sources in hospitals and hospice facilities who provide information about wealthy patients with limited family support. Once a target is identified, they compile exhaustive dossiers, medical histories, family relationships, psychological profiles, financial assets, everything an operative like Ronnie needs to craft a convincing approach. The forgery capabilities of the organization are state-of-the-art. They possess software that can analyze handwriting samples and generate near-perfect replications, capable of fooling even experienced document examiners. They have access to authentic legal documents from law firms worldwide, which they use as templates. They even employ retired government officials who can produce birth certificates, death certificates, and other legal documents that appear completely legitimate in official databases. Ronnie herself, investigators discover, is not even her real name. She is Elena Kovar, a former actress from Prague who joined the organization after her theatrical career failed to launch. Her ability to assume identities and sustain them for months at a time made her one of the organization's most valuable operatives. Over her decade with the group, she participated in at least 8 major operations, claiming a total of 11 lives and helping steal over $100 million. The poisoning methods employed by the organization reveal a disturbing level of medical sophistication. They use a cocktail of substances, thallium, arsenic compounds, certain plant toxins, that mimic the symptoms of natural age-related decline. The doses are carefully calculated to accelerate existing health problems rather than cause obviously unnatural symptoms. The poisons are administered in items the victims consume regularly: medications, food supplements, even in the case of Monica, in the herbal tea that Ronnie would prepare during their sisterly visits. Justice for Monica and the Cordains legacy restored. The aftermath of Ronnie's exposure sends shockwaves through Port Charles that extend far beyond the Cordains family. Monica Cordains' death, initially mourned as the peaceful passing of a beloved community figure, is retroactively recognized as murder, a calculated killing by a professional assassin who had smiled and held Monica's hand as the poison did its work. The grief of the family transforms into fury, with even the typically measured Ned Cordains demanding the harshest possible prosecution. The forged will is immediately invalidated once the fraud is proven. The Cordains mansion, which Ronnie had briefly owned for those surreal weeks following the will reading, reverts to Monica's actual estate, to be distributed according to her genuine final wishes. Tracy learns, in a bittersweet revelation, that Monica's actual will had left the mansion to Michael Corinthos, her beloved grandson, whom she trusted to preserve the family legacy and raise his children there, exactly what Tracy had always suspected Monica would do. Exhumation of Monica's body and toxicology screening confirm what Tracy had suspected: significant levels of poison in tissues and bones, revealing months of systematic administration. The medical examiner's office issues an amended death certificate, changing the manner of death from natural to homicide. This confirmation transforms the case from inheritance fraud to capital murder, ensuring that Elena Kovar, aka Ronnie Bard, will face the most serious charges possible. The investigation into the international criminal network continues for months, with Ronnie's testimony, given in exchange for potential leniency on one of her 8 murder charges, helping authorities identify other operatives and ongoing operations. At least 3 other elderly wealthy individuals in North America are placed under protective custody when investigators discover they are current targets of the organization. Interpol raids in Geneva, Singapore, and the Cayman Islands dismantle significant portions of the network's financial infrastructure, freezing hundreds of millions in stolen assets. For Tracy Cordains, the victory is profound but bittersweet. She has protected her family's legacy and exposed a murderer, but she cannot bring back Monica. The 2 women had shared decades of conflict and competition, but in the end, Tracy had fought harder for Monica's memory and justice than perhaps anyone expected, including Tracy herself. At a memorial service for Monica, held months after the truth came out, Tracy delivers a eulogy that few who know her caustic personality would have thought possible, speaking of the woman who had been her rival, her sister-in-law, and ultimately her friend. The Cordains family, tested by this ordeal, emerges with renewed understanding of the importance of protecting one another. Jason Morgan, whose investigative skills helped unravel the conspiracy, is praised by Anna Devane for his role in exposing the international fraud network. Michael Corinthos, now the rightful inheritor of the mansion, vows to honor Monica's memory by ensuring the house remains a gathering place for family, just as she had always wanted.